Hello everyone, hope you're safe and well. It is Monday evening. You will notice that after the game on Friday night, which was of course a delight, we recorded an On The Ball podcast, and we're going to be doing this within 24 hours hopefully of each Norwich City game over the remainder of the season. This isn't all of the podcast, but it is most of it, so I hope you enjoy it, and if you do, then why not subscribe to it with your audio podcast player. You should be able to find On The Ball wherever you can search. Enjoy it, and we'll be back again with another one of those after the game against Everton, and of course you'll have a usual video verdict from me after the game too. Let's hope it's a happy one as well. Welcome to the latest edition of On The Ball, a Norwich City podcast from The Athletic. My name is Michael Bailey. I'm The Athletic's Norwich City correspondent, and I hope this finds you safe and well. The Premier League is back. There was definitely a moment where we all dared to believe, and then Norwich City kicked off. We're going to have loads of energy in this podcast. Energy, push, energy, although it might just tail off after the first 15 seconds. We will bring you a nice compact podcast with the crew after every game of the Canaries' remaining fixtures, starting right here and now with former Norwich City press officer Ben Mouncer.
Hi, Michael.
And our own Scottish journalist and commentator extraordinaire, Hodge the Hack, a.k.a. Stuart. Hodge.
Hello, how are you doing, Trips?
Good, thank you, Stu. I'm going to return the question. How are you guys both on this Saturday lunchtime?
Basking in the glory of Premier League football's return. I would like to have been saying, but instead, it's really just sort of a bit stunned by last night's Friday night's performance and result.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I relegated us in January in this podcast. I think maybe even December. I was very much of the we're going down brigade, but I thought this could play into our hands. It's like, as they said, a 9-game mini-series. Get 4 points minimum from the first 2 home games, and then let's see where we go. 6 points, and we're right back in it. And then that happened.
I was trying to find it this morning. Someone posted something saying, how long will it be before all of our optimism is crushed? And I think they went for the 12th minute. I was trying to find it because I was like, you're probably about 4 minutes out. So that's a pretty good shout.
I think it was at Holtermania on Twitter.
It was, wasn't it? Well done, Ben. Good shout. And looking at everyone on this Saturday morning, getting so excited about the return of Premier League, is like, none of that felt. Anyway, just to appraise the situation, Norwich lost 3-0 at Carrow Road to Southampton, all goals coming in the second half. You probably all know that because you probably watched it. We're going to sort of have a structure to this podcast. It's not going to be particularly long, unless we get overexcited, which seems unlikely. So the first thing I'm going to ask is snap verdicts from you both. You can sling mud, you can rant, you can praise. Just keep it nice and succinct. Stu, do you want to go first? Your snap verdict?
Right, 8 minutes, decent football. Looked like, maybe we're going to do something here. Ralph Hasenhüttl went to the edge of his technical area, barked at his team, told them to press higher and quicker, and Norwich City did nothing thereafter.
Beautiful. Ben?
Yep, snap verdict for me is trying to match up Southampton man for man with exactly the same system and ultimately falling well short because A, players aren't used to playing in that system, and B, they seem or appear to have been not conditioned as well in the sort of quote off season that we've had over the last 3 months.
Yeah, so part two, the next bit is we're going to debrief the game properly, and that was my piece kind of revolved around the fact that Norwich played 4-4-2, the first time they've started in that formation under Daniel Farke since he arrived. So you're talking about we are talking about 3 years, calendar years, and almost 3 seasons. He has started with 2 strikers before, but not last season or this. It was mostly in his first season. So quite a big departure, and by focusing, you can obviously read the piece over at The Athletic, by focusing on that, there's probably an element where it suddenly becomes that was the key point as to where it did all go wrong. And I'm not really saying that either, like you just said there, Ben, but it did strike me that they'd obviously worked on it, but it was quite a big change for what was probably a limited opportunity to work on something like that. And after the initial sort of burst where Southampton, I kind of figured might struggle. That was what I was expecting from them. But after that initial burst, Norwich just looked completely lost with what they were supposed to do, and they couldn't really get their heads around it until they changed formation. And to be honest, by that point, the game was over anyway.
Yeah, I think, allow me to or try and make a nerdy sort of tactical point.
That's why we're here.
Remembering that I've got no coaching badges at all to back me up on this. But as far as I can see, if you want to try and play 4-4-2 in this kind of possession era of football, there are two sort of key areas of the pitch for me, and it's the central midfield and the two strikers ultimately. And I think if you compare Norwich's and Southampton's men in those areas yesterday, I think it just shows you why Southampton, while playing exactly the same system, and a lot of focus will be on the 4-4-2 system, blah, blah, but that system can work if you execute it really well, as Southampton did. So Southampton's two central midfielders, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg and James Ward-Prowse, energetic, technically proficient, perfect for a two-man central midfield in a 4-4-2 system. And then the two strikers, Michael Obafemi and Danny Ings, energetic, again, combined really well, looked like they'd played together. If you compare them to obviously Timu Pukki and Josip Drmic, who obviously, as Daniel Farke said after the game, they'd looked really good together in the few sort of days before, and it was a system they definitely worked on. It looked as though they had no kind of functionality as a pair at all, and they didn't look like, as you know, when you play a front two, and obviously it's quite rare these days really, but whenever you do play a front two, they need to have that sort of symbiosis between them, and there didn't appear to be any of that between Drmic and Pukki. And then in central midfield, while I actually thought Tribal and McLean in those first 10 minutes started really well and actually were on top of Ward-Prowse and Højbjerg, for the rest of the match they just got completely overran, and Southampton made that system work because their pressing in central areas was relentless. It was absolutely relentless, and Norwich weren't able to ultimately recover from that from the entire match.
Yeah, and what that brings up for me is that brings up the question of, was it fitness levels? Because you can forgive a lack of match sharpness, and you know that obviously this whole COVID thing has kind of set everything in a totally different kind of way than it usually is. But I thought we looked languid. I thought we looked lethargic. I thought it looked after the first 20 to 25 minutes that the team was burnt out. And it doesn't matter like how long you're out. If you're a professional athlete, then you're going to have a certain level of fitness that the average human's not going to have. And 20 to 25 minutes is more than that. So where is it going wrong? Because you can't look that unfit that quickly in a game, especially a game of that magnitude, crowd or no crowd, right? It's 9 cup finals. You've got to approach it with that mentality. And that was one side of it. The other thing for me is the ability to inject impetus, right? So Farke ball, yeah, we've all loved it and it looked really good in the Championship, right? But if you're going to play 4-4-2, that automatically lends itself to being a more direct sort of style of football. So with that in mind, right, if you're getting pressed in central areas, as happened after the first 10 minutes, then what you've got to then do is move the ball wide. Use the fullbacks, use the wingers, and use the width of the pitch. And then you've got two targets. Rather than the usual, there's no one in the box, you've actually got two targets that should be, if they've got enough energy to run into the box, in the box to aim at. And Norwich City didn't do that. They kept trying to pass the ball along the back, getting pressed, making mistakes, and that was in the first half. And then in the second half, Southampton just went, oh, look at this, look at the space we're getting, we can just exploit that. And it was so naive, but so one-paced. That's what stood out for me. It was like the ability to try, and there was the odd attempt at a sort of longer ball, whatever, but there's no one sort of going, right, I'm going to run with it here, or we're going to get it wide, we're just going to play it into an area, into space. And that's what you've got to do. If you change the shape, then you've got to adapt to the sort of strengths and weaknesses of that shape. And it just seemed like there was absolutely no cognizance of that whatsoever. And that was what was really disappointing. As well as the naive defending and all of that we saw in the second half, the really telling thing for me was their one half opening for Pukki created nothing. And that is so telling.
I mean, the second half, I cannot remember a single sort of positive sequence of possession or attacking intent in that second half. And I completely agree, Stu, with your point about the fullbacks. Obviously, we know Norwich are at their best going forward when they get into those kind of half spaces out wide where you have, for example, Buendia and Max Aarons and Pukki and one of the midfielders linking up and short exchanges of passes. There was nothing of that. The fullbacks didn't get high enough. They didn't get the wide men in the game. And obviously, as Michael wrote in his piece on The Athletic, they changed systems twice in the second half to try and make it work, but nothing worked ultimately.
No, and just a quick one on the fullbacks. Jamal Lewis as well. I think Jamal, like, he's got so much running power. He's so quick, but sometimes he runs forward. He sees no options, and rather than just maybe hitting in a cross, just going right, we've got two men in the box. Let's sort of play the percentages here. He's like, oh no, I've got to find a yellow jersey no matter what. So he'll turn back, run back 20 yards, and then play a pass back to the centre backs. And if you're going to play a system with two up front, play to the strengths, play the early cross.
I struggle to think of starting with the system without an El Hernandez, I have to say, because it felt like someone like Nathan Redmond, who kind of bridged brilliantly between the midfield and getting up in attack, and just what Southampton were able to do in transition. It was a key part of when they started really exploiting the spaces.
It was really interesting to see a team in Southampton who are well drilled in this 4-4-2 system, and looking at the individuals and how they go about their roles. Like Nathan Redmond, I thought was excellent, especially I don't know, just the positions he was taking up on the pitch, and obviously when he was on the ball, his footwork was excellent. Stuart Armstrong as well played a really interesting kind of role from the other flank. I don't know, it just seemed to me like it was a clear example of two teams playing the same system. One of them who has clearly played it for a lot longer and are far better drilled in it than the other.
And that was the thing, knowing I was going to write a piece about Norwich's initial formation, and then obviously watching them try and change it and presumably pose different problems to Southampton because of where their emphases were changing. Yet Southampton didn't have to change one iota, just tweak what they did, but the shape didn't change because they were so good at it. It didn't really matter. And you kind of make this point about what Norwich were doing formation-wise, but ultimately it was about far more than that. And clearly the fitness debate is an interesting one. I think with this one, I'm going to give Norwich the credit until after the Everton game, because generally and genuinely inside the camp, they were convinced they were in really good shape. They'd come back in good condition, and they'd liked what they'd seen against Tottenham, and they thought, here we go. And as you said, Stu, it literally was 20 minutes. You were watching them going, they look knackered. And it's like that. And Southampton grew in it. And as I said, it just looked so much stronger. Quite clearly in the second half as things were unravelling, and there was just this, I don't think I'll ever forget it, this silence in the ground when they conceded the first goal, obviously, because no one was there, but there's the silence, and then you just look at everyone. It's like you visibly see people go in their shells when there's a crowd, but it was just loneliness. It was so powerful, and it completely shattered them, I thought. Norwich were in a fragile position anyway, so probably that's why. But I think a lot of looking how off it they were after that moment was as much mental as it was their physical condition. So that's why I'm prepared to give them the Everton game to see how it comes up. Obviously, Norwich have had injury issues as well, and Daniel also mentioned the positive test for Marco Stiepermann in the build-up. I mean, I love Daniel. I love so much what he does, but it did feel like a few excuses were coming out last night.